Hey folks, today we get to take a look at a netbook that I've wanted to get my hands on for a while, or at least a variant of it. I'm sure some of you have heard of the Dell Mini series, the Mini 9, the Mini 10, the Mini 10V, etc., etc. Dell did very interesting things with this line of laptop, and I'd like to talk about it. This, for all intents and purposes, is a Dell Mini 9, but it is the Vostro version of it. This is the Dell Vostro A90, and instead of the silver color that was common with these netbooks back in those days, this one is a nice black. So it's pretty sweet looking. As you can see, the keyboard has been shrunken. It's very small. Just look at it so you can take a look at the layout. They put the shift key all the way over here, which, believe it or not, was a good choice because my pinky can actually reach that. They made the tab and the caps lock keys really tiny. It's a very condensed keyboard, and if you're not used to unusual keyboard layouts, it takes getting used to. Luckily, I'm pretty used to those, so that's fine. It has a 9-inch screen. I believe it's 1024 by 600, which is the typical netbook resolution. Has a webcam up there and everything. Power button here, a big old battery right there. And the touchpad, which is not too bad of a touchpad, actually. As you can see, it's an Intel Atom-based machine. It has an Atom N270 in it, which is what most netbooks, which is what your typical netbook would have. Windows XP as well. So let's take a look at what this thing has to offer for I/O. Get a Kensington lock port. You get power, of course, barrel-style connector. 2 USB ports. Get a memory card slot that can take SD, Memory Stick Pro, and MMC cards. On the other side, you get your audio jacks, of course. You get what looks like a fan, but is actually just a vent. There's no fan in there. It's just, you know, some place for air to pass through. Just kind of weird. You'd think there'd be a fan there, but there isn't. Okay, you have another USB port, VGA without the screws, and Ethernet. So, there you have it. And on the bottom, of course, you just get the battery and the cover that lets you look at the RAM and stuff. Which, let's delve into right now, because there's some important information in there. One thing I would like to throw into the Dell Mini 9 Vostro A90 type review is that this laptop is passively cooled all the way through, which is the flaw that my Dell Mini 10V had. So you can see where they got the inspiration from for the new design. They literally took the Mini 9 and the Vostro A90 and stuck it in a new case that had a better screen and all that kind of stuff, and a better keyboard. So passively cooled computers, I'm not too sure. It seems like something that would not last very long. It's what killed my Mini 10V. The RAM controller blew on that one. So, I don't know if that's such a good idea on laptops. But that's the way it was designed. It made it small, and, you know, having it on a lap blocks airflow, so, Now, what Dell did with these laptops is kind of weird, because they had to save a lot of space when, of course, when building these laptops. So they opted for a lot of these smaller laptops to either use the 1.8-inch hard drives or SSDs on a card. Now, 1.8-inch hard drives were common in things like iPods at the time. You know, you'd buy an iPod Classic or something, or an iPod Video, and it would have one of the 1.8-inch Toshiba hard drives in it. They, of course, were prone to failure. What they chose to do with this laptop was different. I think Dell did make, well, I don't know if Dell made one actually, but Asus made it a EEE PC with a 1.8-inch hard drive. Dell did make a few notebooks with 1.8-inch hard drives. I don't know if they did any netbooks though, but once you open the bottom cover, you're greeted with this. You have the wireless card here. You get your one RAM slot here, which has a gig of RAM in it at the moment. It's PC2 6400S, so it's 667 megahertz memory. And you get your SSD right here. This little card here is your SSD. Let me turn that around so you can actually read it. This is what they did instead of a hard drive for these little netbooks. This thing would ever focus, that would be great. Come on. Whatever. But they use these little SSDs on a card. This is an STEC SSD made in Malaysia. It's a 16 gig SSD. And this seemed like a good idea at the time because, you know, you don't have to worry about dropping the netbook and losing your data. But there was one critical problem that I think is a huge flaw. These are IDE SSDs. Slow. This is before trim. This is before, this is before a lot of these things had a lot of cache. So this is an early SSD. IDE SSDs are very, very slow, and this one is no exception. Now, a popular upgrade at the time for these was to put a run-core SSD in there, which you can still buy now, but they're just hideously expensive. So it's really not worth it to upgrade. Unless it was at the time, but now it's not. I'll put it that way. But yeah, IDE SSDs. That's nasty, man. That's very nasty. But you know what? It did work. It worked for the time. These things ran Windows XP pretty well off of those, and it was decent. It did the job. If you formatted that FAT32 with Windows XP, it would be fine. So the journaling wouldn't slow everything down. But yeah, that's the one unusual thing they did with these tiny netbooks is they used IDE SSDs. Nowadays they have mSATA SSDs and PCIe SSDs instead of the IDE ones. So it's generally much better. This slot is just wired for IDE. The same type of slot you'll find in newer laptops that use mSATA and PCIe SSDs. It's just that it's wired differently. They're not electrically the same. So that is the one unusual thing about this netbook, other than its size, was that. And I thought that was very unusual. So I don't know, man. IDE SSDs. That on a card, I don't think that makes much sense because they could have just put a SATA controller in here. If you were to buy an IDE SSD for an older laptop to keep it alive, that makes more sense to me. But I don't know what they were thinking. Maybe it was the cheapest option at the time, but in my opinion, I think they could have utilized that a little bit better. But they were trying to make a cheap laptop, and they did. So there you have it. So I forget what OS I've installed on here. It's either Ubuntu or Debian. So we'll boot that up and take a look at it. The other flaw of this machine I don't like is the power adapter. Dell, what were you thinking? Why would you make a wall wart that doesn't even have the plug facing the right way? It's a sideways one, so it fits in like that. Which kind of sucks when you're trying to fit this into a tight space. You have to end up using an extension cord or something. That really sucks. I hate that. So, yeah, that's another thing. My Dell Mini 10V was the exact same way. Although I think that plug went like this instead of like that. So it actually had like a decent shape to it. Takes our standard barrel connector though, so it's not that bad. You can just shove it in there and there you be on your way. So let's plug this in and show you how it fits in the outlet like a obnoxious wart. Look at that. That's so stupid. Anyway, let's boot the machine up and take a look at it. I believe it has Debian on it because it was the fastest thing I could find on here. Yep, does have Debian on it. So let's watch it boot. Now, as a Windows machine, this sucks, mainly because of the IDE SSD. It's a very slow SSD. Linux does pretty well. As you can see, it boots fairly quickly into Debian, which is a light OS to begin with. So let me log in here. I have Debian with the Mate desktop installed. Yep. Yeah, it's good for this. I mean, it's nice and fast for with Linux as a light OS like this. So it does fine that way. So I can open up like let's try opening FileZilla just as a test. See, that wasn't too bad, but on an SSD you'd expect it to be instantaneous. You know, on Windows it was unbearable. I tried Windows XP, it was really slow. Even Ubuntu was a bit slow on this. At least Chrome opens up decently. So as a Linux machine, this is totally usable for, let's say, looking at PDFs or something while you're working on another computer or something like that. But yeah, this is the general screen size and everything. 1024 by 600. I don't like the 1024 by 600 resolution because it cuts off too much. More height is generally better on a small laptop, which is why the ThinkPad X series have such nice resolutions for what they are. This one, on the other hand, doesn't. So let's do LSPCI so you can see what kind of chipsets and stuff are in here. See, I tried the full screen and it didn't full screen properly. I don't know what the deal is. There we go. Realtek Ethernet. It uses the Broadcom VCM 4312, which of course that's a generally good chipset. I've never had an issue with it, but you know, it's one of those ones where you have to install the firmware in Linux for it to work. A lot of ICH7 based chipset families in there, so similar to Socket 775 stuff. For graphics, it has the G45M/GMS/GME integrated graphics. So it's your typical netbook setup as far as that's concerned. So ICH7 chipsets and 945 graphics. It's pretty typical for the time. That's the kind of stuff you'd find in like Core Duo machines as well. So this is the Dell Mini 9. Nowadays, I consider it kind of an unusual netbook. I like these weird netbooks. They're fun to play with. This one is very nice for what it is, for the size. The Dell Vostro A90 is pretty cool. The speakers in it are pretty decent, actually. They get fairly loud, so you could use this for like Skype or TeamSpeak or something, and it would work fine. So there you have it. That is the Dell Vostro A90, very similar to the Mini 10V, or the Mini 10V, the Mini 9, sorry. It's the Vostro A90, very similar to the Dell Mini 9, except in Vostro form, which just means it's high-end consumer grade, basically. So, there you have it. There's an example of why glossy black plastic sucks. It just turns into a complete mess after a while, and looks like crap. Anyway, that is the Dell Vostro A90. I thought it was an unusual little netbook and was worthy of a video, so hope you guys enjoyed this, and there's more to come. Have a good one, everybody.